So today we're going to be working on multiplying some square roots here together. And so if you look at the rule up here at the top, it says the nth root of A times the nth root of B. As long as they're the same root there, you can combine those by multiplying both of them underneath the radical. So that only works like if you've got the cube root of 2 times the cube root of, let's say, 3. You can put them together underneath. 2 times 3 underneath there would be 6, so you get the cube root of 6. That's only true since they're both cube roots there. You got a little 3 out there. So then you can multiply the 2 inside the cube root there together. So coming down here, letter A here, notice you've got a cube root here, but this is like a 2 out here in front of the 2 there. It's like a square, it's a square root, it's not a cube root. So you can't do anything with this one. So you could just rewrite the answer, or say cannot, or you could say cannot simplify. Do not just leave it blank, because otherwise that implies you don't know what the answer is. So letter B there, we could go ahead and combine those. We could end up saying the cube root of 2 times negative 4. And 2 times negative 4 there is negative 8. So now I could think what times what gives me negative 8. So if I want to write it out, it's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. And so the cube root there of that would be negative 2 because there's 3 2's in here. Or you could just do it on your calculator. You could just find out what the cube root of negative 8 there is. And I'll go down there and do letter C there. And then I'll come back there and we'll look at that one there together. Because I want to pull up, while we're working on the last one there, I want to pull out the calculator and show you where the cube root button there is. So let's come down here and look at letter C here. So fifth root of negative 5 times the fifth root of negative 2. Again, we can combine those together. So I can take the fifth root here, combining negative 5 and negative 2 there. So negative 5 times negative 2 there is negative 10, or positive 10. So I just get the fifth root of 10. If you try putting that into your calculator, you're going to realize you can't get it. But let me just remind you how you can do that on your calculator. So I'm going to do second quit here. So you can go down to your math key here on the TI-84s and 83s there. If I want to do the third root, that would be the fourth one down there. So I can either scroll or I can hit 4. And the third root there was of negative 8. So negative keys down here. Make sure you punch negative 8 and not the negative sign and not the subtraction sign, because you'll get an error if you do. And you'll see we get a negative 2 like this one for letter B. So then if we come down here and let's look at the, how do we do fifth root on there? Well, you have to hit 5. And you want to go to math key and go down to number 5 there. There's an X root. So if it doesn't end up above, like the third root or the square root that's on the regular calculator, you got to go down to the X root, put 5 in first and then X root, and then punch in 10. You're going to realize it comes out to be some decimal. So we're looking for exact answers there, so we're just going to say the fifth root of the square root of 10. We're not going to approximate them. So letter A here, it says to simplify these. We want to break these down. So if you try to do square root of 24 in your calculator, and we could do that, square root. So square root is right above the x squared, so I could do square root of 24. And it comes out to be some decimal answers, so not a nice exact answer. So let's go ahead and let's break this down. When I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking what times what gives me 24? Oh yeah, 4 times 6, and I'm picking 4. I'm not picking 8 and 3 or 2 and 12 because I can't find the square root of any of those. But I can find the square root of 4. The square root of 4 there is 2. and I can't find this break down the square root of 6, so I'm just going to leave it. I could break down 6 farther, 2 and 3, but you can't find the square root of 2 and you can't find the square root of 3. So let's look here at the cube root of 24. So now we're doing cube root. So you want to think of numbers you actually can find the cube root of. This gets a little trickier. So you've got the cube root of 3 times the cube root of 8. We've got the cube root of 4 times the cube root of 6. We've got the cube root of 2 times the cube root of 12. Don't pick 24 times 1 because we already can't find the cube root of 24. You could plug that into your calculator and see if you could figure out the cube root of 24, but we can't find that. Cube root of 3, can't find the cube root of 3, can find the cube root of 8. So I'm going to use cube root of 3 times the cube root of 8. Because the cube root of 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So remember, there's 3 2's being multiplied in there. 2 times 2 times 2. And that's what it's looking for on that. It's saying what's being repeated in there, what can be repeated in there 3 times when it's the same number. It'd be a 2. So you always write your whole part piece first, and then your rational part, rational root there, second there. So our square root or cube root there goes next, our root part. So there we have it, 2 times the cube root of 3. Again, you want to think about what times what, so gives you that value. So we want to go ahead and try to figure out what the cube root of 54 there is, but it's not going to come out nice. So we've got some options. So let's break it down. I could think, oh yeah, 6 times 9. And if you can't see it, just keep breaking them down. So, and that's the same thing as 2 times 3, and then 9 there is 3 times 3, and now I can put them all together and it's the same thing. So I really get 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. So does anything in there occur 3 times? Yeah, the 3's do. So the 3 pops out in front, and I'm left with underneath the cube root right now, I've got x to the 5th, and I've also got a 2 underneath there, because the 2 didn't repeat 3 times. Oops. So now the variables work differently than the numbers there. You could go ahead and do them the same way. In other words, I could think, oh yeah, because it's to the 5th power, I could write it out. And then I can see I've got 3 x's there. So then I can pull one of those out. So I get 3x, pull that grouping out. And then I'm left with the 2 still underneath there, and then there's 2 more x's there, and combine those back together, you get x squared, because it's x to the first times x to the first. You add your powers there together, and you get x to the second. The other way you could think through that one is, I'm going to move these down here. The other way you can think through this is whenever you've got a variable here, because we got 3x and we've got a 2 here. Actually, I'm going to do this 3 here. I've got x to the 5th there. You can think about the x to the 5th there as x to the 5, because it's the 5 up here, divided by whatever that root there is. And think about it, how many go in there evenly? Oh, 3 goes into 5 once evenly. So I can pull an x out. And then how many are you left over with? Well, 5 minus 3, there's 2. So I'm left with 2 of those. So I get 2x squared. So you can kind of think of how many go in there evenly, or you can completely pull it apart like we did. So 128 there. So we're thinking what times what gives us 128? And I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's an even number, so 2 goes into it. So maybe 128 there divided by 2, and that will give me 64. And then I'm thinking, oh yeah, 64 can be broken down as 4 times 4 times 4, which then gives me that grouping of 3 4s again. Or on your calculator, you could do the cube root of 64 and you'll get 4. So then what am I left with? I'm left with x times x times x times x times x times x. There's 7 of them. So looking for groupings of 3, you got 3 and 3. So I'm going to rewrite this one more time. There. So then what are we left with? Well, there's a grouping of 3 4s here, so the 4 pulls out. You've got a single 2 in there, so that's going to stay underneath the cube root. You've got a grouping here of 3 x's, so that means x. You've got another grouping of 3 x's, that means another x. And then you got a single x left inside, so that's going to stay inside there with the 2. So really, you end up getting 4x squared times the cube root of 2x. All right, and let's try one more of these with cube root. Square root now, good, square root. Square root, most people understand a whole lot better. 48, we could go ahead and think, well, what times what gives us 48? And I'm thinking, oh yeah, 3 times 16 gives me 48. So I can do 3 square root of 3 times the square root of 6. And then remember there's like a little 2 out here, if you want, because now we're looking for groupings of 2. And now we've got x times x times x times y times y times y times y. So now we're looking for groupings of 2. We're looking for pairings. So doing that, we end up getting the square root of 3. Can't do anything with that. Square root of 16 is 4, because remember this is kind of like 4 times 4, so that's a grouping. So the 4 pulls out, I'm left with a 3. I'm going to now got a grouping of x's over there, so I'm going to pull the x out. And then I've got a grouping of y's, and I've got a grouping of another pair of y's, and I forgot to put my lonely x back in there. So combining my y's over there, y times y is y squared, and I'm left with the square root of 3x. So there we have that result. We got another cube root here. You could try punching in your calculator. You could punch in the math key, go down to number 4 there, punch in 27 and find the cube root of 27. Oh yeah, it's 3. And then we've got the x's. So now we got x times x times x times x times x times x times, whoops, too many. Only 6. So groupings of 3, because there's a little 3 out here. So we end up getting 3x and one more x. There's nothing left in that cube root this time. So we just get 3x squared. And like I said, you can go ahead if you want on your calculator. You could have just punched in 27 and then the x portion there, because it comes out nice, another way of looking at that is x to the 6/3, because you got a power of 6 here with a 3 out here. And 6/3 there is just 2. So we end up getting 3x squared. So however you want to do that, you're still going to get 3x squared either way. Right. And then square root of 72 here, there. Think about what times what gives you 72. If you thought 8 times 9, let's try that. And then we've got, remember there's like a little 2 out here. So x to the 5th there, if you want, we could do 5 halves and think about how many nice ones go in there. Well, 5 divided by 2 doesn't come out nicely, so you want to drop down 1 and you want to go with the even one. So then you're left with 1x underneath the radical. So if you drop down 1, I'm left with 8x, because you got 1 left, 1 odd extra 1 there left over. And the square root of 9 there is 3, and x to the 4 halves there. Let's do that. X to the 4 halves there ends up being x squared. And then I got a 3 out here outside. and I'm left with square root of 8x. But I can still break down that 8